Good morning again to everyone. Um, we will begin our study this morning. And last week we ended on this slide, 1844, and the reintroduction of the covenant. So, what we will discover this morning, we will actually discover 1844. What significance does that date have in relation to the reintroduction of the covenant? Why reintroduction? Last week we saw that it was Satan's um, effort to get rid of the covenant, right? And we saw how he did it through persecution and through the perversion or of doctrine, right? Now today we would look at this again in light of the seven churches of Revelation 2 and 3 to get a clearer understanding of this reintroduction. Something was lost, something was trampled to the ground, was cast down. So, in light of the churches, in alignment with the feasts and the sanctuary, we will see God's effort to reintroduce the covenant, and it is linked to a specific date, and we would look at that, right? So, we are on the trumpet still, and on the sanctuary as we look at the antitype of these things. And as I said, we're going to look in relation to the churches. Now, in Revelation 2, the first church that we encounter, and for those who may not be aware, Revelation chapter 2 and 3, we know this is prophetic language. So even though at the time of John, there were literal churches, these churches in Ephesus and Laodicea and all of that, um, God used those literal churches to give John an overview of what his church throughout Earth's history would experience. So even though there were literal churches back in Asia, God now uses these literal churches to show what will happen to his church during specific periods throughout Earth's history. So we could apply time to these things as well. Right? And the first church, Ephesus, we know that Christ died AD 31. He went to heaven sometime thereafter. So this would be the church of Ephesus from AD 31 to about 100. Right? Now, what we want to look at is what was transpiring, because throughout the church's history, God would have admonished his church, encouraged his church, and warned his church. So we want to look at these things, right? We're just going to summarize because these things we should know. So, in the Ephesus church, the doctrines of the Nicolaitans were coming in, so God warned them of that. Now, obviously, what we need to do as well is we are looking at how the enemy from the offset has been attacking God's church. Sorry, and this is why last week we saw that God's trumpet, so God's judgment, was against a particular institution that was being used by the enemy to hinder the work of God. Right? So we're actually going to see what was transpiring during these churches. So the doctrines of the Nicolaitans were in the Ephesus church, so they were warned concerning that. Now the second church dispensation is Smyrna, from about 100 to 323, right? There were blasphemies that came in. The Bible says that it was also called the synagogue of Satan, and there were tribulation for 10 days. So this was under the Rome, who persecuted God's people for 10 days or 10 years, right? This was under Diocletian, and we looked at that in the Revelation study, right? So these things were actually bombarding the church. We go to Pergamos, which is about from 323 to 538. The Bible says that the doctrine of Balaam was established. it was also called the seat of Satan, right? The seat of Satan was established as well, and there were faithful martyrs. So there were those who were in the church who were rejecting this, and they actually died for their faith. Thyatira 538 to 1798. So this period here is what we call the Dark Ages, right? 538 to 1798. That 1260 period where the church literally had to hide in mountains, caves. They went what the Bible calls in the wilderness, right? And speaking of this period, the woman Jezebel was ruling. Woman represents church. Jezebel was a false prophet. So we know the institution that was large and in charge at this time during the Dark Ages. Rome, right? And again, Sardis, we account that from 1798 to 1831. Now, hear what the Bible says of Sardis. For I have not found thy works perfect before God. And this is understandable. Now, if it is we look back to the churches prior to that, the enemy was bombarding, yes, the people, persecuting, killing them, etc. But he was also messing with the doctrines. So at this time, we know that from 1798, many fled from the east to the west, and we can be even more specific. They fled from Europe, they went to America, and now they had freedom to worship as they please. But obviously, because they came out of the Dark Ages, there was some things, some doctrine, some information that was lost. So their works was not perfect before God, right? Now, we're looking at Philadelphia, and it's very this time period here is extremely important, right? Now, in relation to all of these six events transpire while Christ is in the holy place, right? That's for information's sake. So, what was said about Philadelphia? We're going to read that shortly, right? But we know that after Philadelphia, we have the last church dispensation, which is Laodicea, right? And sometime thereafter, Christ must move into the most holy. So I want us to read what is spoken of concerning the church of Philadelphia. And it is taken in Revelation chapter 3, verses 7 to 12. But we're just going to read up to 9, right? We don't need to read all 12. Hear what it says. And to the angel of the church of Philadelphia write, these things saith he that is holy, he that is true, he that had the key of David, he that openeth, and no man shutteth, and shutteth, and no man openeth. I know thy works. Behold, I have set before thee an open door, and no man can shut it. For thou hast a little strength, and hast kept my word, and hast not denied my name. Behold, I will make them of the synagogue of Satan, which say they are Jews, and are not, but do lie. Behold, I will make them to come and worship before thy feet, and to know that I have loved thee. Now, verse 9, I know we may not remember this, but this speaks to the time when God glorifies his people. In our Revelation study, we harped on the voice of God shaking the heavens and the earth. And when that happens, God people were glorified. So this sends us way into the times when the plagues fall, and at the seventh plague, God's voice is heard, and God now glorifies his people. So this is the event. Now, what is important is that there's this open and shut door. And God has set before, obviously, the Philadelphian church this open door. Right? Now, for those who may not understand what is this door, right? In the sanctuary, we would know the door as veils or curtains. So, in entering the sanctuary, there's a veil or something that is called also the door or the entrance. But actually, there are two doors. You have one as you enter into the holy place, and then there's another to enter into the most holy place. So there are two veils in the sanctuary. So these are also called doors, right? So what the Bible is saying is that God, during the Philadelphian period, he opened a door and he shut a door. Not only that, he presented before the people or set before them an open door. So we want to find out what these things mean, right? We want to find out what these things mean. right? So an opening of a particular part or compartment of the sanctuary. So this is what we just read there. And this open door was set before or given to the church, obviously the church of Philadelphia, the sixth church dispensation. Now, last week we also looked at the sixth and seventh trumpet. Actually, we looked at all seven. Today we're just going to focus on the sixth and seventh because the sixth and seventh actually correlates with the Philadelphian time period, right? And we're going to see that today as we see the culmination of these things because something happens here that we need to be aware of, right? So the sixth trumpet, we saw that it spoke of the rise and fall of the Ottoman Empire. And this is just a picture to remind us what was being spoken of. And the seventh trumpet, which is also called the third woe, right? This introduces the plagues, right? When this sounds, the plagues are being explained or expressed here in Revelation 11. Now, when we look at this carefully, the seventh trumpet as introduced by Revelation 11 shows us the culmination of these events. So the seventh trumpet or the third woe, though it speaks of the plagues, these plagues are the culmination of the third woe or of the seventh trumpet. When we go to Revelation 10, we are introduced to the seven thunders and the little book and all of these things which we looked at last week. This really alludes to the beginning of the seven trumpets, right? So the beginning of the seven trumpets, Revelation 11 shows us the culmination of these things or the end, what will happen at the end of these of the blowing of these trumpets, right? So keep that in mind. Revelation 10 shows us the beginning of it. Revelation 11 shows us the culmination of the seven trumpets. This in Revelation 10, it speaks of the seven thunders, which we know are events that were not permitted by John to write, right? Only in the seventh church dispensation were they to understand. So I'm hoping that we remember this, right? And the little book is the book of Daniel as well. So we're going to come back to all these things, right? So again, during this dispensation, there's an open door. This was set before the people. And Revelation, even chapter verse 9, brings to view the plagues as well, right? And we saw that Revelation 11, Revelation 10, and Revelation 9 brings to view that sixth and seventh trumpet in relation to this time frame. So we wanna look carefully at this sixth trumpet because we know the date that it rose, 1449. When did it come to an end, right? We want to know when it began. We want to know when it ended. Because if the sixth trumpet began and ended at a specific time, then logics would tell me, then when the sixth trumpet ended, something will begin. What do you assume would begin, or at least the culmination of these things would start to begin at the end of the sixth trumpet? Anyone? If the sixth trumpet ended today, what is supposed to follow thereafter?
Time. Day of Atonement.
Not so much. We're going to look at that shortly. But
Thunder.
I didn't hear that. I didn't hear that, Sister Mary.
After trumpet, thunder.
No, but after the sixth trumpet, there's one more.
Or the woe.
Right, the woe or the seventh trumpet. So when the sixth trumpet completes, then the seventh trumpet begins. Right. So this is what I was trying to get there. So thanks, Sister Mary.
Woe.
So we want to find out when the sixth trumpet completed, and we will get an idea of when the seventh trumpet began, because the seven trumpets, as it states in Revelation 11, it speaks to the plagues. So am I saying that the plagues begin right after the sixth trumpet? No, because the plagues are the culmination of the 7 trumpets. So there has to be some event that shows the beginning of these things, right? And this is what we want to look at this morning. So let's move forward. So Revelation 9 tells us when the 6 trumpets will end. So we want to read this here. It says, "And the 6th angel sounded, and I heard a voice from the 4 corners of the golden altar which was before God, saying to the 6th angel which had the trumpet, Loose the 4 angels which are bound in the great river Euphrates." So we know these were the 4 sultans, right, of the Ottoman Empire. "And the 4 angels were loose." So we're going to see the duration of time they had to rule, right? "Which were prepared for an hour, and a day, and a month, and a year, for to slay the 3rd part," we know this is Rome, "of men." So when you add up all of these, a year, a month, 1 day, and 1 hour, you come up with prophetic time of 391 days, or prophetic years, and 15 days. Right? So I did the maths for you all here. 391 years and 15 days. So this is the total time that God will permit the Ottoman Empire to reign, or to have that power, where we now call Turkey, right? So we know this commenced in 1449. So this is some simple maths here. It commenced in 1449. So all we need to do is plus 391 years and 15 days to 1449, and it will bring us to 1840, right? So what happened is that the Ottoman Empire reigned until 1840, where thereafter they would have lost power, right? They would have lost that power in 1840. So the 6th trumpet began in 1449, and it ended in 1840. Now, why am I linking the feast, these trumpets, with the churches? Because they go hand in hand. Now, during that 6th church dispensation, something happened, right? A Methodist Episcopal preacher called Joseph Litch. He was a part of the Millerite movement, and he looked at the prophecies that we just looked at concerning the Ottoman Empire, and he predicted, based on what we just calculated, that the Ottoman Empire would lose its power August 11th, 1840. Now, I'm just giving you some history. They thought he was crazy. Some people scoffed at him. But when August 11th came, 1840, and the Ottoman Empire did lose their power by yielding to the sovereignty of Europe, this now caused a big, big, big stir. And I'm saying big because big is still an understatement. When the Millerite movement, when they got this correct, it not only proved the prophecy, but a lot of people now flocked. They came to the Millerite movement because they saw that if this is true concerning the Ottoman Empire, then the message that Miller was preaching is true. So this hundreds of thousands came. This was a big, big, big deal back then, right? So they believed in the Miller movement, that Christ was supposed to come back to earth to destroy the earth. Now we know that he made an error in his assigning the earth as a sanctuary. But what we are looking at here is Josiah Litch prediction of the fall of the Ottoman Empire, which caused a big stir back in the days, and a lot of hundreds of thousands of people came now into the movement, right? So the trumpet, the 6th trumpet, I don't know if you're all able to see this here. The 6th trumpet ended in 1840. So this is within this time frame. Therefore, we can conclude that the 7th trumpet started in 1840. Right? Now, we want to look at, why am I saying that the 7th trumpet started? Right? We know that there was an open door, right, during this time frame. God presented this open door before the people. Revelation 10, it brings to view, well, we read Revelation 10 last week, right? Revelation 10 is the little book, the book of Daniel. And we know that Jesus had his foot on the sea and on the earth. So that really shows us that God had his proclamation of his gospel in the eastern hemisphere. He switched it up to the western hemisphere because of the persecution, obviously. And then seven thunders were about to utter. So certain prophetic events was given to John, and John was told, do not write it. It will only be understood in Laodicea time, in the Laodicean time period, right? So this is what was communicated in Revelation 10. Now, when we did our Revelation study of the third woe, we looked at Zechariah, Joel, Songs of Solomon, and Habakkuk, because the first, second, and third woe has something in common that we looked at, right? And all of these, in relation to the text that I just called, all of these references God's people as horses. Zechariah would say goodly horse, Joel will say God's horses, Solomon beautiful horse, etc. or glorious horse, based on the version of Bible that you have. So what we are seeing here is that God, during this time when the seventh trumpet sounded, God was now starting to gather a people. So this is why I said the seventh trumpet began during this time frame. So God was now gathering a people, and that prediction by Josiah Litch aided in God now gathering his people, God now getting that message out and causing this big stir during the Philadelphian time period. And we know that when we read through this text, these goodly horses are what brings judgment upon, well, in this case it's Rome, right? So, and we know that last judgment, God says all who take up the mark, they will drink of the wine of his wrath. So this is the plagues, right? So this third woe, these horses will bring forth God's judgment, God's last judgment upon Rome or anyone who would receive the mark on his image. But the culmination of these things began in 1840, right? So let's move forward. Now, we want to look at Daniel here. We looked at this already, concerning the sanctuary being cast down. The truth was cast down. The sanctuary and his host was trodden underfoot. And we want to look at the last two verses here, because we didn't look at these. We looked at these two. So we know that Rome, he magnified himself to the prince of the hosts, right? And the place of the sanctuary was cast down. So we know that what they did, they intentionally got rid of the sanctuary truth, right? Again, it is repeated. He cast down the truth to the ground and practiced and prospered. Now, something happens thereafter. As Daniel is interacting in this vision, hear what one saint says to the other saint. Because what God is telling us, yes, Rome, it destroyed the sanctuary truth. We saw that last week. But here God says something. Hear what he says. Then I heard one saint speaking to another saint, saying unto that certain saint which speak, how long shall be the vision concerning the daily, well, the daily is pagan Rome, and the transgression of desolation, this is papal Rome, to give both the sanctuary and the host to be trodden underfoot. So let me put this in English that we could understand, right? So the two saints are communicating, and they are saying, well, how long will Rome have this power to destroy the sanctuary truth? How long? Like what going on here? The answer is given, right? Because also this answer is also inferring how long will God permit it. So at some time God will have to put an end to it. He will have to stop them from what can I say, from hiding, destroying his truth. So God now will re-establish his sanctuary truth. So let's look, because the answer is given, right? And he said unto me, unto 2,300 days, then the sanctuary shall be cleansed. Now, it's a twofold answer there. So one, we know that God is saying here what? I would re-establish my truth after 2,300 days. So yes, Rome, he persecuted the churches, he hid the sanctuary truth, but here what Daniel, I would re-establish it at the end of the 2,300 days. Now, that is one. The fact that he used the sanctuary be cleansed, this also aligns with a specific feast. This also aligns with a specific feast, well, yes, a specific feast that the Jews celebrated. And we would look at that sometime soon, right? So God is saying after 2,300 days, he will re-establish his sanctuary truth, and it will align now with a specific feast. And Brother Nigel gave the answer a little bit earlier on. So we want to look at this, right? We know Daniel 9:25. Daniel 9:25 gives us the start date, because 2,300 days, Lord, where are we supposed to start calculating from? Well, God doesn't leave us in the dark. He told us where to start from. He says, know therefore and understand that from the going forth of the command to restore and to build Jerusalem. We went through this in our Daniel study. Unfortunately, again, we don't have the recording for that. This commencement began at 457 BC. Right, 457 BC. So, sanctuary be cleansed. We want to know when the sanctuary be cleansed, because we know that at that time, God now would re-establish his sanctuary truth. And it is also aligned to some feast, right? So to calculate, all you do is you add the 2,300 to the 457 BC. Now, with time is a bit tricky, because time BC counts down, whereas AD, so we are in 2026 AD. Now, we don't say AD, we would just say 2026, right? So that goes up. So from BC, it counts down, meaning counting down to the birth of Christ. And after Christ's birth, then time goes up. So AD 1, AD 2, AD 3, up to 2026, right? So how do we calculate this now? Because we're going from BC to AD. So all we do is we take 2,300 and minus 457 BC from it. Now, I want you all to do the calculation for me. I'm not going to give you all the answers. Could someone with their calculator or their phone that has a calculator minus 2,300 from 457 minus 2,300, and what do you get? I'm going to give you 2 minutes, a minute to do it.
$18.43.
Right. So we get 1843. Now, this date is very significant in relation to the Philadelphian time period. Why is it very important? Because during that time, and this is stuff that we know, during that time, they miscalculated this, right? So even though Sister Gail would have used a calculator and the calculator gave her this answer, this is the wrong answer, right? This is the wrong answer. Now, what happened in integers, or when you do your regular counting, you would count down from negatives. Let's say -1, then you will have 0, then you have +1. Now, in time, because we're calculating time, there isn't a 0 date. So from -1, you go to 1. So that 1 will be the day that Christ was born, right? And then you go up. So there isn't any 0 year that would infer that at that time the world didn't exist or something like that, right? So there isn't a 0 year. So what you have to do is to compensate now for that 0 year when we look at the integers, and it will actually bring us to 1844. Right, so this is how we get to 1844, and this was an experience that was encountered during the Sixth Church dispensation. These things, we are seeing things that were hid. Remember the 7 thunders, they were not permitted to utter their voices. So what we are seeing is the actual events that were hid from the Sixth Church dispensation. This also, something here also was hid from them, right? So let's continue. Now, for those who may not know the integers, so this is what I was speaking about, right? So from minus to negative, to positive, sorry. So we go down, then there's a zero, then we go up. But when we are calculating time, you don't have a zero. You go from -1 to +1. So you have to add back this integer to get the correct date. So that's how we get to 1844. So we are seeing a lot of events that are taking place in the sixth dispensation in relation to the trumpets, because we know that the seven trumpets started to sound 1840. God was now gathering a people, and he would set before this people an open door, right? Revelation 10, we know that the seal, what the seven thunders uttered, so they didn't understand these things. They had some disappointments during this time, right? These disappointments became to view or came to light or took place because of the little book. The little book is the book of Daniel. It was sweet to their mouth, but their experience was bitter, right? Their bitter disappointment. And there was two bitter disappointment, right? One in 1843 and then another in 1844, right? And then in Revelation, go ahead.
The investigated judgment.
Yes, no, they didn't come to that knowledge just yet, because in Revelation 10, hear what it says. Only in the days of the seventh angel, and we know the seventh angel is linked to the seventh church dispensation, the mystery of God will be finished, or the mystery of God will be understood. So during this time period, they didn't understand what was going on. They really thought here what Christ is going to come back, and we're gone. The earth will be destroyed, and we are gone. But that didn't happen. But God in Revelation 10 predicted all of this. He said only in the seventh church dispensation would they understand the mysteries of God. And we know that the mystery of God is the sanctuary, right? That covenant that God gave. But way back in Pentecost, he will start to re-establish this. And we looked at Daniel. Daniel say 2300 days, then his sanctuary shall be cleansed. So God now starts to re-establish his truth at that specific time in 1844. We know that at that time, God also moves from one compartment into the next. And this is why Revelation 3 says a door was open. So it wasn't this door here at the entrance. It must have been the door into the most holy place. Right. So at that specific time, God moved in. Now, this lines up with the Day of Atonement, or the Day of Atonement. So the sanctuary being cleansed is linked to this specific feast. Right? You all are all with me, right?
Yeah.
Right. So
Yes.
in 1844, the Atonement began. He moved from the holy to the most holy. The sixth church, they did not understand what was going on, but thereafter now they would understand. And just as they did in Pentecost, Jesus himself must make his church understand. So how does he do that, right? How does he do that? We remember Hiram Epson. We're not going to read through all of this, because we should remember the day after the Great Disappointment, right? October 22nd, 1844. Massive, massive disappointment. Prophecies failed, people were rejected, they were dejected, they were sad, they were sorrowful. And Hiram and Crozier were walking through a cane field because they felt shame. They felt real shame. So they were trying to hide from people, but they were also going to, encourage the brethren, let's still look up and so forth. And while there, Epson had a vision. So let's read what was highlighted here. As they neared the middle of the field, Edson felt as it were a hand upon his shoulder, stopping him. And looking up, he saw, as in a vision, the sanctuary in heaven, and Jesus on that day, which ended the 2300 year of the prophecy, leaving the holy place and entering into the most holy for the cleansing of the sanctuary. So again here now, Christ, just as the day of Pentecost, he now has to come, and now Christ doesn't leave, right? The Holy Spirit is now working on his behalf. So the Holy Spirit impresses Epson to see this vision, And the truth now of the sanctuary is starting to be re-established, right? So God now is leading his people and seeking to re-establish his sanctuary truth as it was predicted in the book of Daniel and as it was predicted in the book of Revelation, right? So this happened on the 23rd of October 1844. And we know that this truth went out and they studied it and they came to a realization that yes, the sanctuary is definitely not the earth. There is a true sanctuary in heaven. And God now was really moving from one compartment to the next at that specific time. He wasn't supposed to come back to the earth as yet to destroy the earth. He was moving from one compartment to the next. And this is just Crozier's book that was published 2 years after that event of the great disappointment, right? So this sanctuary truth was now re-established amongst God's people. A slide is missing. Wow, a slide is missing here. How is a slide missing? Sorry about that. So let me just copy this here. This is crazy. So we're coming to an end here. So we're ending here now, right? So what we what we should see is that as God now is moving from the sixth to the seventh trumpet, what happens here? He is re-establishing a people unto himself. At a particular date, which we know, October 22nd, 1844, he moves in. This is linked to the Day of the Atonement. He moves into the Most Holy to begin the cleansing of the sanctuary. This movement aligns with his people as well because they now has to be brought up to speed. They have to be taught of this covenant message that was lost, that was destroyed by Rome. Sorry, that was destroyed by Rome. So God now sends a vision to Edson and re-establishes this truth in 1844 in the Laodicean time period, right? So the seventh trumpet, God now is gathering his people, these goodly horses or these beautiful horses. He's gathering a people. Now he reintroduces his covenant to them. This covenant was reintroduced on the Day of Atonement. Well, a day after, but it aligns now with this feast, which is the Day of Atonement. Now, this brings the study to an end because we will continue next week on the atonement because as he moved from one compartment into the next, there are some things that we need to trash out because at this time Satan is frightened. Satan is terrified. This is why, and we're going to see why Revelation 12:17 says he went to make war with the remnant. Now, what is the remnant? Remember these seven churches here, right? The Ephesus church is the church that where the apostles began, right? And Revelation 12:1 speaks of this woman with 12 crowns. Now, Revelation 12:1 extends from the Jewish dispensation into the Ephesus church. But we saw that throughout the church's history, the devil was attacking the church, and beating up the church until a remnant now was drawn out by God. So God has his remnant. He will re-establish his truth with his remnant. And because of that, in alignment with this feast, he now goes to make war with his people, with God's people. Because why? When we look back at our study, God's people were to what? They were to keep the commandments, and by that now God is able to still who? Still the enemy, and the enemy is obviously Satan and his fallen angels, right? It will also include the wicked, but we're not going to focus on the wicked right now. That's Satan and his fallen angels. This covenant being reintroduced at the atonement or at atonement in alignment with God's people. Satan is seeing that wait, God now has back a people with this covenant truth, and they will be obedient to him and still me? No way. I am moving to make war with this church. And we will see the war that he has made. And what we will notice is that, next week we will see that, what we will notice is that what happened between this time period has happened during this time period. The casting down of the sanctuary, which is the message, even though God would reestablish it, we will look how he reestablished it and so forth. But we will see over time, Satan has come in and cast it to the ground, right? Persecuted the church, etc., etc. But we will see what God's counteraction or counter plan is in relation to the devil's attack. So we need to see this because the devil is in trouble here. Because at the day of atonement, two goats are selected. One is the Lord's goat, and one is the Azazel. This is the devil, right? And this is the home stretch for his destruction. So he's seen this, and he he doesn't want any part of that at all, right? We will also look at the curtain. You notice the curtain here is a bit dirty with blood,
Blood, yeah.
right? So what we would see is that the priest now has to cleanse this, right? We'll see how the priest cleanses this and his work now in the most holy place. So there's a lot we have to look at next week. But at this time we ended pretty early, praise God. So now the time is now yours. If there's any questions or any comments, anything that needs to be clarified, you can do so at this time.